Hello everyone, a very welcome to all of you to the Hindu analysis of 12 December 2020. The first article which we are talking today is Center set to unveil ambitious PSE disinvestment policy. Who said this? Bajaj. So the new public sector enterprises policy for strategic disinvestment is far more ambitious than most would anticipate. The government didn't want to do something routine. The policy will be very ambitious, which is more than anticipated, and it will happen very soon. And for the very first time in India, it is going to happen. This would bring a paradigm change in the way people think in the गवर्नमेंट. तो ये सारे चीजें जो थे ये कहा गया था बजाज ग्रुप के हेड से. सो द न्यू पब्लिक सेक्टर एंटरप्राइजेस पॉलिसी फॉर स्ट्रैटेजिक डिसइन्वेस्टमेंट इज फार मोर एम्बिशियस देन मोस्ट वुड एंटिसिपेट. यानी कि बहुत सारे लोगों जो सोच रहे थे डिसइन्वेस्टमेंट के बारे में, जो गवर्नमेंट पब्लिक सेक्टर एंटरप्राइजेस में स्टेक्स सेल करना चाहती है, उसको लेके जितने भी कंसर्न्स है उन सारे कंसर्न्स को एड्रेस करने के बाद और भी काफी ज्यादा फायदा लोगों को देने वाली ही एक प्रोजेक्ट होगी ये नए पीएससी डाइवेस्टमेंट और डिसइन्वेस्टमेंट पॉलिसी. एंड गवर्नमेंट कुछ हमेशा बाकी सारे गवर्नमेंट्स जो करती है वैसा करना नहीं चाहती है और ये और भी काफी ज्यादा महत्वपूर्ण होने वाली है. And this is the very first time in India such a disinvestment scheme is being brought. This will bring a paradigm change. That means a revolutionary shift in the way people think in the government. So the finance minister has already mentioned that even strategic sectors would have only 1 to 4 public sector players and the rest will be privatized. यानी कि क्यों एक दूसरे से कंपटीशन? अगर आईओसीएल, एचपीसीएल और बीपीसीएल, ओएनजीसी 4 ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस है, 4 हमें क्यों चाहिए? इसलिए पहले क्या किया, एचपीसीएल को ओएनजीसी में डाल दिया. अब बीपीसीएल को बेचने की ऑलरेडी काम जो है वो चालू है. तो इन द ऑयल मैन्युफैक्चरिंग सेक्टर इटसेल्फ they want only 1 or 2. We have at present ONGC, GAIL, IOCL, then Oil India Limited. ऐसे कई सारे ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है, लेकिन हम लोगों को इतना सारा ऑर्गेनाइजेशन क्यों चाहिए? एक या दो शायद सब कुछ कर सकती है, बिकॉज ONGC it can take care of all the things because now it has its HPCL as its subsidiary. Similarly, if we also sell BPCL is will be sold very soon. If once the corona crisis is gone, BPCL will be sold. तो इतने सारे ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस को कम करने की बात हमेशा हमारे फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर और प्रेजेंट गवर्नमेंट करती है. तो that's why the remaining organizations will be privatized, and the way they are being privatized will be a revolutionary is what Mr. Bajaj is saying. There had been some cooling off in the economic activity after the festive season. Things hadn't gone down as much as expected. तो ये भी सही है, दिवाली की सीजन खत्म होने के बाद इकोनॉमिक एक्टिविटी काफी स्लो हो गई है और उस वजह से हमारा ग्रोथ रेट और जीडीपी जो है वो बहुत ही बुरी तरह affected हो सकती है. So that's why that is also a matter of concern. There will be few blips here and there, but all positive and cautiously optimistic. सब लोग optimistically positive है, so इसलिए everyone is hoping that in at least in the Q4 of this year, Q3 and Q4 of the current financial year, we are expecting a good growth rate so that we can come out of COVID-19 crisis to some extent or the other. Growth would drive the review of monetary policy framework which is next due in March. So Q3 का ग्रोथ जो है और Q4 में पहले 2 महीने का ग्रोथ रेट जो है वो चीजें काफी ज्यादा इम्पैक्ट करेगी द मॉनेटरी पॉलिसी फ्रेमवर्क which is due in March. So that is about a small article on public sector disinvestment. Now disinvestment, you can very simply say that, let us say for example, government has In HPCL, 51% share is belonging to government. Now government will sell this 51% and it will earn money by selling this 51% of shares. That is nothing but your disinvestment. But the way in which it does the disinvestment so as to get more and more profits is the game changer in this particular context. NK Singh calls for a fresh look at the seventh schedule. So, the 15th Finance Commission Chairman, Mr. Nandakishore Singh, yeah, NK Singh, called for a fresh look at the Constitution's seventh schedule, which forms the basis for allocating subjects to center, state, and he also hinted at the need to fill an institutional vacuum created by the abolition of the Planning Commission. तो यहाँ पे उन्होंने ये कहा था कि द थ्री लिस्ट्स, द स्टेट लिस्ट, यूनियन लिस्ट एंड द कॉन्करेंट लिस्ट, जो सेवेंथ शेड्यूल में लिखा हुआ है उसको रीशफल करके एक नए अंदाजे से उसको एडिट करने की जरूरत है, ऐसा कहना है एनके सिंह जी का. एंड ही आल्सो सेड दैट देयर इज एन इंस्टीट्यूशनल वैक्यूम व्हिच वाज क्रिएटेड बाय द एबॉलिशन ऑफ द प्लानिंग कमीशन. अभी तक हम लोगों को 5 ईयर प्लान्स की वजह से जो भी एक स्ट्रैटेजिक प्लानिंग मिलती थी, नीति आयोग की स्ट्रैटेजी वैसा नहीं थी. नीति आयोग इज मोर ऑफ ए लॉन्ग टर्म अप्रोच, बट द ऑनगोइंग ईयर्स के लिए भी कुछ अच्छी तरह से एक और ऑर्गेनाइजेशन का नीड है, एक और ऑर्गेनाइजेशन की जरूरत है जहां पे एक इंस्टीट्यूशनल वैक्यूम क्रिएट हुई है. दैट इज मोर इम्पोर्टेंट. The coordination between the Finance Commission and the GST Council had become a inescapable necessity as both were constitutional bodies dealing with revenue and grappling with unsettled questions. तो यहाँ पे फाइनेंस कमीशन जिनका चेयरमैन था नंद किशोर सिंह एंड द जीएसटी काउंसिल हेडेड बाय द फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर. So these two now should have a lot of coordination because both are constitutional bodies and both deal with revenue, and there are a lot of unsettled questions between both the organizations. फाइनेंस कमीशन एक चीज रिकमेंड करती है लेकिन जीएसटी काउंसिल दूसरी चीज करती है. तो all these become the operational issues when it comes to the coordination between both the organizations because both of them are constitutional bodies. Finance commission is a constitutional body, GST council is also a constitutional body, and there arises a problem. Planning commission is an extra constitutional body, that's why much issues were not there with planning commission. Now deserves serious consideration. The symmetry in the working of GST council and finance commission requires serious consideration. Finance commission looks at projections of expenditure and revenue, but issues of GST rate exemptions, changes and implementation of indirect taxes are entirely the domain of GST council. तो सबसे बड़ी मुसीबत यहीं पे आती है. अगर आप मान के चलिए फाइनेंस कमीशन किसी एक प्रोडक्ट पे 28% जीएसटी अगले 5 साल के लिए कैलकुलेट करके उसके हिसाब से रेवेन्यू का जो डिवोल्यूशन है वो रिकमेंड किया था, लेकिन अब जीएसटी काउंसिल ने क्या किया, उसको 18% कर दिया. तो लिटरली देयर इज ए 10% लॉस इन रिडक्शन इन टैक्सेस बाय 10%. जब 10% ऑफ टैक्सेस रिड्यूस होती है तब क्या होती है, नेचुरली इट हैज ए लॉट ऑफ प्रॉब्लम एसोसिएटेड बिकॉज दिस 10% ऑफ टैक्स जो है वो 5 साल के लिए बहुत ज्यादा और बहुत महंगी भी पड़ सकती है गवर्नमेंट के लिए, बिकॉज द एक्सपेंडिचर will be based only on this, and expenditure is something which is always in rise and it never reduces. So that is also another matter of concern, and this leads to lot of unsettled questions on the ways to monitor, scrutinize and optimize revenue outcomes. ये सारे चीज जो है उनके हिसाब से उनको लेते हुए बहुत ज्यादा दिक्कत होती है दोनों तरह का. So that's why it is always important to have a proper coordination between the GST council as well as the finance commission. States were keen to have different kind of a policy based consultative forum which center beyond the नीति आयोग and the national development council. यानी कि states directly central government से बात करना चाहती है, that should be beyond the नीति आयोग and national development council. NDC और नीति आयोग से भी आगे एक और ऑर्गेनाइजेशन बननी चाहिए या एक और पॉलिसी बेस्ड कंसल्टेटिव फॉरम होनी चाहिए, बिकॉज देन देयर वाज प्लानिंग कमीशन. Planning Commission used to give a lot of advices to the states in terms of financial planning, in terms of financial discipline, FRBM, and all the other things. So states also were not allowed to recklessly spend a lot of money in the name of welfare schemes by distributing money to the people. So direct distribution of money to people will only make people lethargic. So that's why it is very important to monitor how you are spending for the welfare of the people. तो इसलिए यहाँ पे भी प्लानिंग कमीशन जो एक कंसल्टेटिव फोरम की रोल प्ले करती थी, ये किरदार अभी कोई ऑर्गेनाइजेशन बिल्कुल नहीं प्ले कर रही है. तो इसलिए उस किरदार निभाने के लिए एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन की यहाँ पे जरूरत है. With the abolition of the planning commission, many economists and policymakers have argued about an institutional vacuum. So that is something which is very important, and this is need to give there is need to give serious consideration for a consultative forum for credible policy dialogue between the center and the states. तो पॉलिसी के हिसाब से एक क्रेडिबिलिटी वाली ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को एस्टेब्लिश करना चाहिए ताकि सारे स्टेट्स को बहुत ज्यादा फायदा मिले. एंड रीबिल्डिंग ट्रस्ट, अर्जिंग ए रिव्यू ऑफ बोथ द 7th schedule and article 282 of the constitution so as to give more flexibility to the states in implementing centrally sponsored schemes. That is also another thing which was suggested by NK Singh. These issues needed urgent consideration to reinforce the trust in fiscal federalism. अब कई सारे स्टेट्स का मानना है, particularly नॉन बीजेपी स्टेट्स का मानना ये है कि सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट इज टेकिंग अवे देयर फिजिकल इंडिपेंडेंस एंड इट इज अगेंस्ट फेडरलिज्म. So that's why in order to reinforce the trust in fiscal federalism, there is a much needed approach to deal with this issue. And many have argued that the trust between various forms of government is waning. That means it is completely abolishing, and there are few new seeds of suspicion and मिस्ट्रस्ट. यानी कि आप मान के चलिए आप एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन का हेड हो और मैं एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन का हेड हूँ, हम दोनों ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के बीच में बहुत ज्यादा मिसट्रस्ट और डिस्ट्रस्ट की प्रॉब्लम हो रही है, और उस वजह से हम दोनों की फंक्शनिंग जो है वो बहुत ज्यादा हैम्पर होगी, एंड वी विल नॉट बी एबल टू फंक्शन एज वाइजली as we were doing it earlier. So that is another big matter of concern for both the parties involved in this matter. And are the existing arrangements governing the center state relations, the legislative, executive, and the financial envisaged in the constitution adequate to meet the aspirations of Indian society? ये भी एक सबसे बड़ी प्रश्न है. क्या आज का जमाने में जो चीजें कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में मौजूद है सिर्फ वो सब काफी है, या उसमें कुछ बदलाव लेना चाहिए, उसमें कुछ अलग सा करना चाहिए, या क्या करना चाहिए, क्या होना चाहिए, ये सब चीजों के बारे में भी यहाँ पे डिस्कस करना चाहिए. द चेयरमैन ऑल्सो सीम टू बैक द आइडिया ऑफ लिंकिंग द ग्रांट ऑफ फिजिकल हेडरूम टू स्टेट्स मीटिंग स्पेसिफिक रिफॉर्म आउटकम्स ए टर्म ऑफ रेफरेंस फॉर द कमीशन. यानी कि कई सारे स्टेट्स जहां पे रिफॉर्म्स में काफी ज्यादा आउटकम्स मिली है, लाइक ऑल द साउथ स्टेट्स, दे वर वेरी मच significant in population control. The northeastern states, because of the difficult terrain, they need more expenditure in infrastructure. तो ऐसे कई सारे कंसर्न्स जो है उसको देखते हुए एक अलग सा एक फंड बननी चाहिए जहां पे रिक्वायरमेंट के हिसाब से परफॉर्मेंस बेस्ड एक एलोकेशन होना चाहिए. यानी कि आप अच्छी तरह से परफॉर्म करो तो आपको ज्यादा फंड मिलेगी. अगर आपके स्टेट में बुरी तरह से परफॉर्मेंस है, आप इस चीज को बहुत लाइटली ले रहे हो, तो आपको थोड़ा बहुत सजा मिलने ही वाली है. तो दिस इज एन एडिशनल इनकम which is being proposed, additional income to the states, and additional devolution should be made by the state center to the states. So that is the recommendation of the planning commission, sorry, finance commission. Even in the 15th finance commission report, there is a separate column for this central government allocation, that too an incentive based an intensive allocation that should be made as an incentive to all the states. एक इंसेंटिव की तरह स्टेट्स को देना चाहिए ताकि उनके भी और भी ज़्यादा एक attention मिली. So all these things are important when it comes to what the devolution of funds between center and states. नेक्स्ट आर्टिकल जिसके बारे में हम लोग बात करेंगे कि नॉट all Indian droughts are caused by El Nino. So in general, El Nino is treated as a drought period and La Nina is treated as a flood period. So drought in India have historically been associated with El Nino, an anomalous warming of the equatorial Pacific. बट साइंटिस्ट फ्रॉम बेंगलुरु सजेस्ट द अदर कल्प्रिट्स टू, यानी कि और भी काफी सारे इश्यूज है जिनकी वजह से हमारे देश में कई सारे ड्रॉट्स आए थे और वो इश्यूज क्या क्या है उसके बारे में भी हम लोग डिस्कस करेंगे. द स्टडी दैट appears in the Journal of Science says that nearly 6 out of the 10 droughts in the non-El Nino years occurred during the Indian summer monsoon season in the past century may have been driven by atmospheric disturbances from the North Atlantic region. So this is a new reference and a new terminology that is published in this study. ये आपके SNT में और ज्योग्राफी में दोनों में काफी ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट होगा, यानी कि आपके GS1 एज वेल एज GS3 में ये चीज बहुत ज्यादा आपको देखने को मिलेगा या बहुत ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट बनेगा. So out of the 10 droughts which occurred in the non-El Nino years, 6 are during the summer monsoon season, that is March to September, and most of them were because of the atmospheric disturbance which created in North Atlantic region, यानी कि the region between the North America and the Europe. So the North Atlantic Ocean में जो भी disturbances create हुए थे, those are responsible for what? For the disturbances in the North Atlantic, sorry, in the Indian Ocean, and the droughts in India is consequence of sudden and steep drop in rainfall. In an El Nino year, a abnormally warm equatorial Pacific waters pull moisture-laden clouds away from the subcontinent. This is the most general thing in El Nino, where the Pacific currents take away all the moisture laden clouds. That means all the rain bearing clouds will be taken away by the Pacific currents during the El Nino years. That is a general phenomenon. But the IASC study shows that the non El Nino years, these droughts are consequence of a sudden and steep drop in rainfall in late August. Now, that is something which is again a matter of interest. All of a sudden, why is the rainfall dropping? Because there are no more clouds left. Now, why there are no more clouds left? That is the point of discussion. As early as the 1980s, people have looked at these droughts individually, but they have not collated and pooled them together and deduced that these droughts may all have a different type of evolution than the El Nino droughts. तो ये सारे ड्रॉट्स को पहले हम लोग इंडिविजुअली देखते थे, लेकिन अब हम लोगों को इन सब चीजों को मिला के देखना पड़ेगा. वी शुड कंबाइन ऑल दीज थिंग्स एंड सी हाउ दे आर reacting in non El Nino year and other than El Nino droughts. What are the other reasons which are creating a reduction in rainfall or a steep decline in rainfall? Now, in an El Nino year, the rainfall deficit depart from long-term average will be set in early around mid-June and progressively worsen. लेकिन in a non-El Nino year, the drought will see rainfall and will see similarly weakening in the mid-June. तो या एल नीनो ईयर में भी और नॉन एल नीनो ईयर में भी एक ही तरह से ड्रॉप हो रही है. बट फ्रॉम मिड जुलाई टू मिड अगस्त, which is the rainiest period of the monsoon, the monsoon will appear to recover. लेकिन अगस्त थर्ड वीक के बाद सडन एंड स्टीप डिक्लाइन इन रेनफॉल रिजल्ट्स इन ड्रॉट कंडीशंस. तो हमारे देश में यूजुअली जून फर्स्ट वीक में आती है मानसून्स and it will take for some time to establish across the country. So from mid June it will take a small gap till mid July. From mid July to late August and sometimes till September there will be heavy rains across the country. Some places will be having a continuous rainfall, some places will have a 1 week of rain, फिर 1 week of gap, again 1 week to 10 days of rainfall. A pattern is generally more likely in those conditions. Now, here a sudden and steep decline in the rainfall from August third week is seen during this non-El Nino years, and that is a unique condition which is resulting in a drought. Now, the scientists have tried to see if they could trace this August drought back to a forcing agent or system that influences the behavior over India. And when they looked at the wind pattern that is prevalent during the non-El Nino drought years, they came across some very new and fascinating observations. So it seems that winds in the upper atmosphere are interacting with a deep cyclonic circulation above normally cold नॉर्थ अटलांटिक वाटर्स. तो एक ऐसा साइक्लोनिक सर्कुलेशन की जैसा अपर एटमॉस्फेयर में शुरू हो रही है, कहाँ पे? नॉर्थ अटलांटिक वाटर्स में. अब यहां से ये पूरे ट्रैवल करके कहाँ पे आ रही है? भारत में. वो कैसा आ रही है? द रिजल्टिंग वेव of air currents which are called Rossby wave curved down from the North Atlantic, squeezed in by the Tibetan Plateau and hit the subcontinent around mid-August. So from North Atlantic, these air currents are squeezed by the Tibetan Plateau. So where is Atlantic and where is Tibet? But still, because of the elevated Tibetan Plateau is the most elevated plateau. That means it is higher than many small hills which are located in many parts of India. At that elevation, which is a natural elevation of the Tibetan Plateau, this air currents is suppressing the rainfall and throwing off the monsoon that was trying to recover from the June slump. So the recovery of monsoon is very severely being affected by this Rossby waves. The waves' usual course is to go from west to east, but not towards the equator. That is very important. So, looking beyond looking at the Pacific Ocean is important to consider other influences on the Indian monsoon from outside the tropics. अब तक हम लोग बस एक ही चीज कर रहे थे, वो है जो भी ट्रॉपिकल एरिया में करंट्स होंगी, वार्म ओशन करंट्स या कोल्ड ओशन करंट्स या जितने भी करंट्स होंगे जो ट्रॉपिक्स के बीच में होंगे, उसको ही हम लोग पैरामीटर्स के रूप से लेते थे ताकि हमारे क्लाइमेट को कंसिडर करने के लिए. लेकिन अब ये स्टडी के वजह से और भी ज्यादा प्लेयर्स जो काफी ज्यादा सिग्निफिकेंट है वो भी लाइमलाइट में आ गए थे. द इंडियन ओशन एंड द पैसिफिक ओशन सीम टू बी एट द फोरफ्रंट of all discussions surrounding Indian monsoon droughts, but you should also now include Atlantic in this discussions. Perhaps this is the time to focus just as much as mid-latitude influences, that is between the tropics and the circles. So Tropic of Cancer to Arctic Circle, Capricorn to Antarctic Circle. That mid-latitude influences should also be considered and which might aid in getting a better handle on the enhanced predictability of monsoon variability, because Indian agriculture is more than 50%. Even in today, you can take it for granted 70% of Indian agriculture is still based on monsoons. And there is a lot of economic activity which is based solely on monsoon, and that is always a matter of concern for us. If the monsoons fail, then there will be a lot of farmer suicides and other things that follow, like a very huge rise in prices, making the lives of poor and middle class people even more burdensome. So all these things that follow because of failure of monsoon. So that's why if you can predict monsoons a little earlier and even in a better way, that will be really helpful. Independent scientists say that the link in the research paper is novel and it is yet early days to be able to predict an impending drought in India from this paper alone. यानी कि ये जो चीज़ें हैं ये डिस्कशन के लिए अच्छा है, लेकिन प्रैक्टिकल इसका इम्प्लीमेंटेशन के लिए हम लोग और कुछ साल वेट करना पड़ेगा, कुछ सालों का डाटा और भी एनालाइज करना पड़ेगा. सो ऑल दीज थिंग्स वी हैव टू consider and only then we can conclude it, but we cannot conclude it immediately basing on this research paper. The Indian Ocean, a climate scientist at the Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology, plays an important role in determining the monsoon's performance, and several other factors will have to be considered to develop a reliable model to forecast a potential shortfall in the absence of El Nino. So even the role which Indian Ocean plays in this context is also to be very carefully analyzed, and that is also to be addressed. In 2014, India saw a 14% rainfall deficit or a drought which was not linked to an El Nino. Before that, it was in 1986 and 85 we saw a similar deficit. The sheer size of Pacific means that it influences global climate much more than Atlantic or other oceans, because nearly 20% of the or even more part of Earth is only Pacific Ocean. So you can really say that one third of the world is Pacific Ocean, and another one third is land area, and remaining one third is all the other oceans. That is the Arctic, the Atlantic, and the Indian Ocean together constitutes one third, and Pacific Ocean only contributes to one third of the Earth. So therefore, the later links aren't easily discoverable because of the small area and the less influence on the climate. It is very difficult to get the influences of either Indian Ocean or the Atlantic Ocean on the global climate. But this study shows that they need to look at such links more closely than what they are doing today. So that is about the El Nino. If you know about El Nino and the ocean currents, this article will be very easier for understand. Otherwise, once read the NCRTs or your standard sources related to El Nino and La Nina, and then listen to this so that you will understand it in a very better way. So that's all for the day, guys. I think this El Nino is a little bigger concept for you. So I'll see you in the next analysis. Thank you very much and Jai Hind.